guys, it's Tori. Welcome back to my channel. Today we're going to have a chat about classics. Now, I have tried outlining this video probably 3 or 4 times, but honestly I wasn't really happy with anything I came up with, and I decided that I wanted to turn this into a little bit more of an informal chat. So I took my notes and I threw them away, and we're just going to talk about the classics. Classics tend to be a kind of polarizing genre for a lot of people. You get a lot of people that swear by them, who are obsessed with the classics, who think that more things in modern day should be written like classics. And then you have the other side of the fence where we have a lot of people that think that classics really haven't aged well for the most part, and that they're kind of stuffy and long-winded. Who really wants to read Moby Dick? If you actually read Moby Dick and you enjoyed it, please let me know in the comments, because I would really like to meet you. As with any other genre, classics have some very vehement supporters, and each classic book has its own little mini cult of people who really love it. One of the places that I think you see this the most is in Jane Austen's work. She is a writer who has aged very well into the 21st century, and she is still widely beloved and incredibly relevant in a lot of ways. I see in books that were written hundreds of years ago the same human emotions and the same human struggles that we still have and always will have. And I think that's something that's really powerful and special about classic books in general, is that it's a really amazing way to get a glimpse into where we've come from and what people's lives were hundreds of years ago, and the things that mattered to them, the things that they were struggling with. If you go into a classic novel and you're expecting this novel to be something very modern day, it's not gonna look like that. And I think it's important whenever you read a book of any genre not to expect it to be something else. So with classics, if you go into it understanding that these books were written in a very different time with very different environments, sometimes completely different countries than we live in now, we still are reading books that are told from all different perspectives all over the world. And I think that is so cool, and that is one of the most powerful things I think about literature, is that it can unify so many people that might not otherwise have the opportunity to meet and talk to somebody from a different country or a different walk of life. Now, when it comes to classics being hard for a lot of people to read because they're either long-winded or they might have a completely different vernacular than we have now, they use a lot of words that we're not familiar with. Honestly, I kind of look at it this way. Whenever I read or watch films that are made in a different country, or read books that have been translated from their original language, it's interesting because you don't always understand all of the little isms or phrases that might be in that, and so you have to kind of take it with a grain of salt to understand that sometimes the things that they're describing or the words that they're using were meant to be things that were normal to them at that time. Just like if they came to our world now and they heard us speaking to each other, they would probably be slightly confused, because let's face it, there's a lot of things they wouldn't understand. Now let's talk about another reason why a lot of people find classics to be extremely long-winded that I don't think most people actually know. Charles Dickens is one of many authors that in his time were paid to write stories by the episode. They would come out in newspapers and they would have chapters or episodes at a time. And so obviously if you're getting paid to write by the episode or by the chapter, you're going to try to use a lot of flowery language to draw out the story a little bit more. Is Charles Dickens a bit flowery and wordy in his books? Yes. Did he have a financial reason for doing that? Mostly yes. And one of the things that I do think it really shows is the ingenuity of authors when they are pressed to create something like that. What happens when they are really pushed to make a beautiful setting with more words than they probably needed, but man, can they set the stage, and it really adds such a fine level of detail. They have to really know the environment that they're working with. Now, for the last part of this video, I'm going to be sharing with you guys some of my absolute favorite classics, because even though I know my channel focuses on fantasy for the large majority of my videos, I do really love some classics. You know I love my Motley Crues, and Oliver Twist does it really beautifully. One of my all-time favorite literary characters is the Artful Dodger, who is a character that kind of mentors Oliver, even though he's roughly the same age, and he is the coolest kid. To me, he's kind of the predecessor to a lot of characters like Bean from the Ender's Game universe, or Locke from The Lies of Locke Lamora, or Kaz Brekker from Six of Crows. A lot of these like kind of kids who had to grow up on the street and make a name for themselves at a very young age, and they get a little hardened, they kind of turn to an anti-hero life, and the Artful Dodger is just such a cool character. The next one that I'm going to talk about is The Three Musketeers by Alexandre Dumas. This book is about a group, another motley crew, are we sensing a theme here, of musketeer fighters who are loyal to the king. And then we have D'Artagnan, who, sorry to all of you D'Artagnan fans out there, I'm just not a fan of his character at all. The three musketeers besides D'Artagnan, Athos, Porthos, and Aramis, are amazing characters. They're all very distinct. Now, this could be a daunting book for a lot of people, and I won't lie, I read it last year, and it took me a while to get through probably the first 150 pages of this book, but as I started settling into the style and the writing, it really started to shine, and the characters were so rich and so funny. There were so many funny moments in this. If you like military type stories, and kind of political intrigue stories with really solid characters, this book is phenomenal. Okay, the next one that I want to talk about is actually a short story, and that is The Yellow Wallpaper by Charlotte Perkins Gilman. Now, I'm trying to remember, this was written in 1892, and it is the story of a woman who has some kind of mental condition, and her husband decides that he's going to take the advice of some doctors and basically shut her in a room by herself and see if they can cure her through complete isolation. Now, I'm not gonna lie, this story is hard to read. If things like that are disturbing for you, this is definitely a story I would be careful with. It is exceptionally well written. You can just feel her digression through the story, and I think it is such a powerful commentary on the way that mental health was treated at the time, and also the way that women were kind of passed off as just being hysterics a lot of the time when they were dealing with mental health issues. Now, I know that I've talked about this book quite a bit before on my channel, but I am going to bring it up again, and that is White Fang by Jack London. This is my absolute favorite classic, and it is probably in my top 3 favorite books of all time. This book follows the story of a wild wolf who is brought into captivity. He goes through several abusive masters and then finally ends up with a master who takes care of him and kind of teaches him what love can actually look like. And this story is one of the most powerful character journeys I have ever read. It is hard to read in some spots. It is definitely a very gritty look at just humanity in general, and also what it means to learn how to love after being through a lot of hardships. Even though it's told from the perspective of a wolf, it's brilliant, it's incredibly good, and I can't recommend it highly enough. I am definitely going to throw out a Pride and Prejudice plug here. However, I will admit I have not actually read through the entire book. I know, I grew up with all of the movies. I'm a huge fan of both the 1995 and the 2005? Both Sense and Sensibility movies. If you're a Jane Austen fan, these, they're good. If you like romantic comedy with tons and tons and tons of heart and just characters, it's good. It's so good. Watch all the Jane Austen movies, except I'm going to go on record here and say that I am not a fan of the Keira Knightley version of Pride and Prejudice. I know it's a huge favorite for a lot of people. I personally can't stand it. I will never be able to watch it again. I watched it once, that was enough. One of my all-time favorite books that is a classic, that is also a romance, technically speaking, is Jane Eyre by Charlotte Bronte. Now, this book tends to have a lot of polarizing viewpoints on it. People either really love it or really hate it. I'm in the really love it group. I know that Mr. Rochester is a questionable character at best, but I find him to be really interesting, and also Jane, I feel, is a very lovely, flawed and very human, but determined main character, and I really appreciate that she has the audacity to say no in several instances, where in a lot of books I feel like the main heroines just kind of go along with everything. This one is definitely darker and grittier than a lot of the Jane Austen romances. However, I do really love this book, and I highly recommend it for anyone who wants to read a really intriguing romance. Okay, my last classic, and I know I've mentioned this on the channel before too, Frankenstein by Mary Shelley. In my opinion, Frankenstein is kind of one of the, like, mother stories of modern day character-driven science fiction, fantasy, what have you. It's an amazing look at humanity and what makes us human and why we want the things in life that we do, and like how we connect with other people. There's just so much in this book. At some point I might even do a deeper dive into the life of Mary Shelley on this channel, because she's been through some stuff. This is the only decent literary piece that she ever wrote, but man, was it a good one. Like, if you're only gonna write one good book, and this one's a little bit shorter, so if you have a hard time with classics and you're not really sure where to start, this is a shorter option. That concludes my general thoughts on the classic genre and some classic recommendations that I have for you guys that I personally really love. If you have any classic recommendations, please leave them down below in the comments and let me know what some of your favorite classics are, and just kind of let me know if you are into classics, what you like about them, and if you haven't gotten into classics yet, what turns you off about reading classics. I hope you guys have a fabulous day. I will see you in the next video.